Eva Braun is one of the most enigmatic figures associated with Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler. She was Hitler's longtime companion and, for less than 40 hours, his wife, yet she remains largely a mystery to most people, overshadowed entirely by the man she chose to die beside. Unlike other women associated with Nazi leaders who sometimes played public roles or who had their own spheres of influence, Eva Braun was kept almost completely hidden from the German public throughout her relationship with Hitler. Most Germans did not even know of her existence until after the war, when photographs and information about Hitler's private life emerged. So what did Eva Braun actually do all day? How did she spend her time as the secret companion of history's most infamous dictator? What were her activities, interests, and daily routines during the years she spent waiting for Hitler's attention at his mountain retreat and eventually dying beside him in the bunker? Today, we'll reconstruct Eva Braun's daily life during different periods of her relationship with Hitler, from their meeting in 1929 through the years she spent as the hidden mistress at the Berghof, to her final days in the Führerbunker in Berlin. We'll examine her photographs and films, her diaries and letters, the testimony of those who knew her, and the historical evidence that reveals what her life was actually like. This is a story about a woman who chose a monster for a partner, about the strange combination of privilege and imprisonment that characterized her existence, about the emptiness of a life spent waiting for a man who would never fully commit to her, and about the choices that led her to reject opportunities to save herself in favor of dying in a bunker beneath burning Berlin. Eva Anna Paula Braun was born on February 6, 1912, in Munich, Germany, into a middle-class Catholic family. Her father, Friedrich, was a schoolteacher, and her mother, Franziska, was a seamstress. Eva had two sisters, Ilse, who was older, and Gretel, who was younger, and the three girls grew up in comfortable, though not wealthy, circumstances in Munich and its suburbs. Eva attended Catholic schools and was, by all accounts, an ordinary student, showing more interest in sports, particularly gymnastics and swimming, and in social activities than in academics. She was attractive, athletic, and fun-loving, characteristics that would define her throughout her life. After finishing her education, Eva worked in the photography shop owned by Heinrich Hoffmann, Hitler's official photographer. It was through this employment that Eva met Adolf Hitler in October 1929, when she was just 17 years old and Hitler was 40. The exact circumstances of their first meeting have been recounted in various, slightly different versions, but the basic story is that Hitler visited Hoffmann's shop, was introduced to Eva, who was working there, and was apparently attracted to the young blonde woman. At the time, Hitler was involved with another woman, Geli Raubal, his half-niece, with whom he had an intense and controlling relationship. Eva's initial interactions with Hitler were casual, but after Geli's suicide in September 1931, which deeply affected Hitler, his relationship with Eva gradually developed into something more serious. By 1932, Eva had become Hitler's companion, though the relationship was kept secret, and Eva remained living in Munich, working at Hoffmann's shop, while Hitler spent most of his time in Berlin after becoming Chancellor in January 1933. Eva's daily life in the early years of her relationship with Hitler, from around 1932 to 1936, was characterized by frustration, loneliness, and subordination. She continued working at Hoffmann's photography shop, living with her parents, and waiting for visits or summons from Hitler that came irregularly and unpredictably. Hitler kept the relationship secret because he believed that his image as a leader required him to appear married to Germany rather than to any individual woman. He thought that seeming available and unattached made him more appealing to German women, and that acknowledging a relationship would diminish his mystique. This meant that Eva spent most of her time waiting, hoping for phone calls or messages, and feeling neglected and unimportant. Her diary entries from this period, later discovered and published, reveal her desperation and unhappiness. She wrote about feeling ignored, about her jealousy when Hitler spent time with other women, about her sense that she meant nothing to him, and about her contemplation of suicide as a way to make him notice her and realize her importance. Eva made 2 suicide attempts during the 1930s, in 1932 and 1935, both apparently motivated by despair over Hitler's neglect and uncertainty about their relationship. The 1932 attempt involved shooting herself in the chest with her father's pistol, but she survived with injuries that were not life-threatening. The 1935 attempt involved taking an overdose of sleeping pills. Both attempts were characterized as cries for attention rather than serious, determined efforts to die, and both had the effect of making Hitler pay more attention to Eva and take her more seriously as a committed companion. After the second attempt, Hitler apparently decided he needed to provide Eva with more security and attention, and he installed her at the Berghof, his mountain retreat near Berchtesgaden in the Bavarian Alps, where she would spend most of the rest of her life. From 1936 onwards, Eva's daily life was centered at the Berghof, though she also spent time at Hitler's Munich apartment and occasionally at other residences. The Berghof was a large alpine house that Hitler had built and expanded into a substantial compound with guest houses, staff quarters, security facilities, and beautiful views of the surrounding mountains. Eva was given rooms at the Berghof and essentially became the lady of the house, though without any official acknowledgement of her status. Her daily routine at the Berghof during the peacetime years from 1936 to 1939, and during the war years from 1939 to 1945, followed patterns that reveal the strange nature of her existence, combining elements of luxury and privilege with profound limitations, isolation, and subordination. Eva would typically wake around 9 or 10 in the morning, later than conventional schedules, but early compared to Hitler, who rarely rose before noon. Her morning routine would include bathing and dressing, activities that took considerable time, as Eva was very concerned with her appearance. She spent significant effort on makeup, hair, and clothing, maintaining herself to be attractive for Hitler and for the photographs that were constantly being taken. The Berghof had a relaxed dress code during the day, and Eva often wore casual clothing, including traditional Bavarian dirndls, slacks, or simple dresses during daytime activities. She would have breakfast alone, or with her sister Gretel when Gretel was visiting, or occasionally with other women who were guests or companions at the Berghof, as Eva's rooms were separate from where Hitler spent his mornings. After breakfast, Eva's morning activities varied depending on the weather, the season, and what was happening at the Berghof. On nice days, she would often go outside for exercise and recreation. She was athletic and enjoyed swimming in the pool that Hitler had built at the Berghof, sunbathing on the terrace, taking walks in the mountains, and practicing gymnastics. She was an accomplished swimmer and frequently used the pool, which was covered and could be used year-round. Eva would often spend hours sunbathing, working on her tan, which she maintained carefully. She also enjoyed photography and filmmaking, using expensive cameras and film equipment to document life at the Berghof and on trips. Much of what we know about daily life in Hitler's inner circle comes from Eva's photographs and films, which she shot extensively and which were discovered after the war. Eva's photography and filmmaking were perhaps her most significant activities, and the closest thing she had to a serious hobby or occupation. She shot thousands of photographs and hours of film footage showing Hitler, herself, her family, other Nazi leaders and their families, staff members, and various activities at the Berghof and on trips. Her work was not particularly artistic or technically sophisticated, but it was enthusiastic and extensive. She documented parties, holidays, daily life, landscapes, and people, creating a visual record that is historically valuable, despite being from the perspective of someone completely embedded in and sympathetic to the Nazi inner circle. Eva would spend time developing film, reviewing photographs, organizing albums, and planning what to shoot next. This activity gave her something to do during the long hours when Hitler was busy or absent, and it allowed her to create something and to have a project, even if the project was just documenting her own strange existence. Midday at the Berghof would often include lunch, though Eva's meals depended on who else was present and what Hitler's schedule was. When Hitler was not at the Berghof, which was frequently as he spent much time in Berlin or at military headquarters during the war, Eva would eat informally with whoever else was present, including her sisters, friends, staff members, or other guests. When Hitler was present, lunch arrangements depended on his schedule and mood. Hitler typically did not eat lunch until mid-afternoon given his late waking, and Eva would sometimes eat with him then, or would eat earlier and join him later during his meal. The meals at the Berghof, when Hitler was present, were opportunities for Eva to see him, but they were not intimate meals, but rather gatherings that included Hitler's adjutants, secretaries, and various guests. Eva would sit near Hitler but was not the center of attention, as Hitler dominated conversations with his monologues about various subjects, while others listened. Afternoons at the Berghof, when Hitler was absent, which was most of the time, particularly during the war years, were long periods that Eva had to fill with activities. She would continue her photography, would correspond with family and friends, would read magazines and occasionally books, though she was not particularly intellectual, would listen to music on the gramophone, and would socialize with other women present at the compound. She enjoyed fashion and would spend time looking at fashion magazines, discussing clothes with her sisters and friends, and thinking about what to wear for evening gatherings. She also spent time with her dogs, as she was fond of animals and had Scottish terriers that she kept at the Berghof. She would walk them, play with them, and generally enjoy their companionship during the many hours when she had little else to do. Eva also devoted considerable time to her appearance and beauty routines. She would bathe frequently, sometimes multiple times per day, would apply various beauty treatments and cosmetics, would have her hair done by a hairdresser who was available at the Berghof, and would try on different outfits and makeup styles. This focus on appearance reflected both her personal vanity and her sense that maintaining her attractiveness was essential to keeping Hitler's interest, as she had no other role or function, and her entire position depended on Hitler's continued desire for her companionship. The effort she put into appearance was remarkable and filled many hours of her days, revealing both the emptiness of her life and her anxiety about maintaining the one thing that gave her existence meaning. Late afternoon and early evening were times when Eva would prepare for Hitler's potential appearance if he was at the Berghof, or would prepare for evening social activities even when he was not present. Eva would bathe again, do her makeup carefully, style her hair elaborately, and dress in evening clothes for dinner and the social events that followed. Even when Hitler was absent, Eva and others at the Berghof maintained routines of dressing for dinner and having evening gatherings, maintaining a semblance of normal social life in the strange, isolated world of Hitler's mountain retreat. When Hitler was present, these evening preparations were even more elaborate, as Eva wanted to look her best for the man whose attention she constantly sought. Dinner was the main social event of the day at the Berghof, typically beginning around 8 or 9 in the evening, fitting Hitler's schedule when he was present. When Hitler was there, dinner was a formal gathering, attended by him, Eva, his adjutants and secretaries, various Nazi officials who might be visiting, and other guests. Hitler sat at the head of the table, and Eva sat near him but not directly beside him in the place of honor, as that would have made their relationship too obvious. During these dinners, Hitler would hold forth with his typical monologues about history, art, politics, military matters, or whatever was on his mind, while others listened and occasionally interjected comments or questions. Eva's role during these dinners was largely silent. She would sit, eat, look attractive, and listen to Hitler, but she rarely spoke at length or contributed to the conversations. When she did speak, it was usually about inconsequential matters, as Hitler did not take her opinion seriously and showed little interest in what she thought about anything of substance. After dinner, the evening's activities would continue, often until very late, given Hitler's nocturnal habits. These activities might include watching films, as Hitler enjoyed movies and had a screening room at the Berghof, where he would watch German films and occasionally foreign films, including Hollywood productions. Eva would attend these screenings, sitting in the darkness, watching movies with Hitler and the assembled company. Other evening activities included listening to music, particularly Wagner, whom Hitler loved and would play on the gramophone, or simply sitting around the fireplace while Hitler continued his monologues. Eva would be present for these sessions, sometimes sitting quietly, sometimes interjecting light comments, generally fulfilling the role of decorative companion rather than equal partner or intellectual companion. On special occasions and holidays, Eva would organize events and parties at the Berghof, activities that gave her a sense of purpose and control. She would plan Christmas celebrations, birthday parties, and other gatherings, organizing decorations, gifts, meals, and entertainment. She seemed to enjoy these organizational activities and the opportunity they provided to do something and to be the center of attention, at least temporarily. However, even these events were constrained by Hitler's preferences and schedules, and Eva's role remained subordinate, despite being the organizer. Photographs and films from these events show Eva appearing cheerful and animated, playing hostess and enjoying the social interactions, creating an impression of normality that was fundamentally at odds with the reality of her life as the hidden companion of a dictator. Eva's relationship with her family was important to her and occupied some of her time and attention. Her sisters visited the Berghof regularly, with her younger sister Gretel being particularly close to Eva and spending extended periods at the mountain retreat. Eva also maintained contact with her parents through letters and occasional visits, though her parents apparently had mixed feelings about her relationship with Hitler, concerned about the moral and practical implications of their daughter's position. Eva arranged for benefits for her family members, getting them jobs and financial support through Hitler's patronage, creating dependencies that tied the Braun family to Hitler and that would complicate their post-war situations. Eva's activities with her sisters included shopping trips when they went to Munich or other cities, outdoor activities like swimming and sunbathing, and social time just talking and sharing gossip and concerns. One activity that consumed some of Eva's time and energy was dealing with the other women in Hitler's orbit and managing the complicated social dynamics of the Berghof. There were other women present, including Hitler's secretaries, the wives and girlfriends of other Nazi officials who visited, and various female staff members. Eva had to navigate her position as Hitler's companion without having any official status that would have given her clear authority. She could not be openly acknowledged as Hitler's partner, yet she was treated with deference by those who understood her relationship with him. This created complicated social situations where Eva had to assert herself informally while maintaining the fiction that she was just a guest or friend. She could be jealous and difficult with women she perceived as rivals for Hitler's attention, and she occasionally had conflicts with other women over precedence and treatment, conflicts that revealed her insecurity about her position. During the war years from 1939 to 1945, Eva's daily life continued in patterns similar to the peacetime years, but with significant differences due to Hitler's absences and the changing atmosphere as the war progressed. Hitler spent most of the war at various military headquarters commanding the German war effort, returning to the Berghof only occasionally for brief periods of rest. This meant Eva spent the vast majority of the war years alone at the Berghof or in Munich, waiting for Hitler's rare visits and essentially living in suspended animation. Her daily activities continued: the photography and filming, the exercise and sunbathing, the beautification routines, the socializing with her sisters and the few others present, but with an increasing sense of purposelessness and isolation as the war dragged on and as Hitler's visits became rarer and briefer. Eva's war years were characterized by a disturbing disconnect from the reality that most Germans and especially most Europeans were experiencing. While millions died in combat, while cities were bombed into rubble, while concentration camps murdered millions, while occupied populations suffered under brutal Nazi rule, Eva lived in luxury at the Berghof, largely insulated from the war's horrors. She had ample food when most Germans faced rationing and shortages. She had beautiful clothes and cosmetics when such items were unavailable to ordinary people. She spent her days swimming, sunbathing, and watching films while the world burned. This disconnect was partly imposed by her situation, as she was kept isolated at the Berghof, without responsibilities or meaningful information about what was happening. But it was also a product of her apparent lack of curiosity or concern about anything beyond her immediate sphere. Her diaries and letters from the war years focus on her personal concerns, her loneliness, her desire for Hitler's attention, and trivial matters about daily life, with virtually no reflection on the war's progress or implications. In the final year of the war, 1944 to 1945, as Germany's military situation became increasingly desperate, and as Allied bombs began falling closer to the Berghof, Eva's daily life continued with remarkable obstinacy in the face of approaching collapse. She apparently maintained her routines of beautification, photography, and waiting for Hitler, even as the Third Reich crumbled around her. In July 1944, after the failed assassination attempt against Hitler, Eva wrote to him expressing her devotion and her desire to be with him, demonstrating that her loyalty to him remained absolute despite everything. In early 1945, as Soviet forces advanced from the east and Western allies from the west, as German cities, including Munich, were devastated by bombing, Eva finally made the decision that would define the end of her life. She insisted on joining Hitler in Berlin, in the bunker, where he had gone to direct the final defense, and where he would commit suicide. Eva traveled to Berlin in April 1945 and moved into the Führerbunker, the underground complex beneath the Reich Chancellery, where Hitler and his remaining staff were sheltering. Her decision to go to Berlin, when she could have remained safely in Bavaria, or could have fled to safety elsewhere, demonstrated her commitment to Hitler and her choice to die with him rather than survive without him. Eva's daily life in the bunker during April 1945 was drastically different from her previous existence at the Berghof. The bunker was cramped, dark, uncomfortable, and under constant bombardment from Soviet artillery. There were no more sunny afternoons by the pool, no more beauty routines with full facilities, no more film screenings and pleasant social gatherings. Instead, there was fear, stress, physical discomfort, and the knowledge that the end was approaching. Yet even in the bunker, Eva maintained aspects of her previous routines and personality. She dressed as carefully as circumstances allowed. She maintained her makeup and grooming, and she attempted to keep spirits up among the bunker's inhabitants by hosting small tea parties and by maintaining an incongruously cheerful demeanor, even as explosions shook the bunker and as Hitler raged about betrayal and defeat. Multiple survivors from the bunker remarked on Eva's cheerfulness and her efforts to maintain normalcy, behaviors that seemed either admirably brave or disturbingly detached from reality depending on one's perspective. Eva's daily activities in the bunker included taking meals with Hitler and others, participating in the conversations and gatherings that filled the time between military briefings and crisis meetings, attempting to maintain some social life in the apocalyptic circumstances, and preparing for the death she had chosen. On April 29, 1945, the day before their joint suicide, Eva married Hitler in a brief civil ceremony in the bunker. After more than 15 years as his hidden mistress, Eva became Eva Hitler for less than 40 hours before their deaths. The wedding ceremony was held late at night, fitting Hitler's schedule, and was witnessed by Joseph Goebbels and Martin Bormann. After the ceremony, there was a small wedding reception, a surreal gathering where champagne was served and where Hitler reminisced about the past, while the bunker shook from Soviet shells exploding above. Eva signed the marriage register and made a small error, starting to write her maiden name Braun before crossing it out and writing Eva Hitler, born Braun, a poignant detail that revealed how briefly she would bear the name Hitler that she had apparently desired for so long. On April 30th, 1945, around 2:30 in the afternoon, after Hitler had said farewells to staff and after he and Eva had eaten a final meal, they retired to Hitler's private quarters. At approximately 3:30 p.m., they committed suicide, Hitler, by shooting himself in the temple while simultaneously biting a cyanide capsule, and Eva by taking cyanide alone without using a gun. Their bodies were discovered by staff members who had been waiting outside, and their remains were carried to the Reich Chancellery Garden, where they were doused with gasoline and burned in a shell crater. Though the cremation was incomplete due to limited fuel and the danger from Soviet artillery, Eva Braun's life ended at age 33, having spent her adult years as the secret companion of Adolf Hitler, living a life of privilege mixed with imprisonment, waiting for a man who would never fully commit to her until the final hours before their mutual suicide. So what did Eva Braun actually do all day? She woke mid-morning and spent considerable time bathing and preparing herself to be attractive. She exercised, swam, and sunbathed to maintain her athletic figure and her tan. She took photographs and made films documenting life at the Berghof and on trips, creating an extensive visual record of Hitler's private life. She socialized with her sisters, friends, and other women present at the Berghof, discussing fashion, gossip, and trivial matters. She spent long hours on beauty routines, applying makeup, having her hair styled, and trying on different clothes. She waited, endlessly waited, for Hitler to arrive, to spend time with her, to acknowledge her importance. She read fashion magazines and listened to music. She walked her dogs and played with them. She organized parties and holiday celebrations. She attended Hitler's dinners and evening gatherings, where she sat mostly silent while he monologued, fulfilling the role of decorative companion. She watched films in Hitler's screening room. She dealt with jealousies and insecurities about her position and about other women. During the war, she continued these activities in increasing isolation as Hitler spent years away at military headquarters. In the final weeks of her life, she insisted on joining Hitler in the bunker in Berlin, where she attempted to maintain cheerfulness and normalcy in apocalyptic circumstances, married Hitler the day before their joint suicide, and died by cyanide poisoning at age 33, having devoted her adult life to a man who gave her little in return and having chosen death beside him rather than life without him. Her days were filled with activities that appear trivial and empty, revealing a life without purpose or meaning beyond waiting for and pleasing Hitler. A life that combined material privilege with profound psychological and existential imprisonment, ending in a bunker beneath burning Berlin in a death that she chose as preferable to the prospect of living in a world where Hitler and Nazi Germany had been defeated.